So welcome everyone. If you haven't been welcomed, I'm sure you've been welcomed. This class has been going on for a lot of years in different forms and formats. Most of you know my story, so I won't keep on telling it over and over again. But I encountered this very same book when it first came out, the year after it came out. And the circumstances were strange. I moved into an apartment on, it was called Bayshore Drive in Miami. And the only thing I remember is the apartment had a beautiful swing on the porch looking out at a bay. And down the street was a Unity Church. And at the time, a good friend of mine was dealing with AIDS. And at those days, AIDS was pretty much a death sentence because there wasn't any good medication for it. And somebody handed me a cassette. Yes, a cassette. And some of you won't even know what they are anymore. And it was about self-healing. And I listened to it, and I tried to give it to my friend to listen to it, and he wasn't particularly interested. But the thing about that story that was really funny is within a week or so of moving into that apartment, down at the end of the street was this old Unity Church, a big old thing that at the time it didn't have a lot of people, but they had a big marquee, and mysteriously or miraculously, "You Can Heal Your Life" appeared on the marquee. And one thing led to another, and I wandered in there one day, and I kept going every week. I think it was a Tuesday or Thursday night. And 9 months later, the lady who was teaching the class said, "Would you please continue this class?" And I said, "I'm a real estate broker. I'm a therapist. I have no experience doing any of this type of thing." From that time until this, we've always had a self-healing class going on. So that's a lot of years since that book came out, somewhere around 86 or 87 when it first got in my hands. And it led me to go from presenting the healing material in schools. One year I won an award, and it's called in a program called People Who Dared to Care, and it was on television. And all we were ever doing was presenting these very same materials that we're presenting now, and the school system hired me to go into all of the treatment centers and just present this. And a few years later, because then I realized this book is an extension of the science of mind, I started studying the teaching itself, and it took 4 or 5 years or longer to become a minister and all of that, but it always started with these same healing principles. So everything that comes from Louise Hay originally comes out of her teaching and her education right here at First Center. Our legal name is First Church of Religious Science in New York City, and this is the place, if you were here, you would see the diploma on the wall where Raymond Charles Barker started this place. It's been in a couple different buildings. And Louise Hay was a student during those Barker years. So the very same classes that we teach, Louise Hay was being taught right here with us. So that's a little bit of the history about this group. I think it's probably the oldest running group, continuously running group on her material that's in existence. I do remember Louise Hay was sending me free tickets to her. She would go all over the country with her talks and her workshops, and she was very much aware of the work that I was doing, and so it was always gratifying. She signed my ordination and all kinds of stuff like that. So let me get a little bit into the lesson. So Jimmy started so well, I don't think I can upstage that, but I gave you at least the history. This class now is being watched by over 100 people a week. That's really wonderful. Usually 30 to 50 on a Thursday, and as many as another 50 to 100, sometimes even a lot more every week, and the classes are being viewed all over the world. So that's very gratifying. For any of you who are supporting the center, you always can. We have links everywhere. And $5 is great, or any amount of money helps. But anybody who's watching any of these classes, I think the benefit is if you just keep tuning in, what will happen after a while is you'll just start being reminded of certain things that we have a tendency to forget. We forget how great we are. We forget that we are an inlet and outlet of this divine essence. We forget. Louise Hay would say, remembering and forgetting. It's the game that we play. When you can center yourself and know I'm one with the one, and I'm supplied and I'm supported, and when you can come from that place of connection, then great things can happen. But oftentimes we forget. So we break the connection. I mean, you really can't break it because you're always part of spirit. But it's like you're flying solo when there's always that thing which is within you that you can turn to. So we do this on Thursday, and then we welcome you all every Sunday at 10:45, where we have a lesson, and we always have time for people to share afterwards. We also have a newsletter and invitations and things. If you message Jimmy, he can put you on the list. So that's how you gain access. Most of you must have figured out how to gain access because you're here. Tonight I wanted to speak a little bit about the subject of acceptance. Acceptance means different things to different people. We have in our audience usually 20-30% of people who've been through some type of spiritual recovery. It could be an Al-Anon program, it could be CODA, it could be AA, NA. There's loads of 12-step programs out there. And that group understands acceptance because it's part of their program. Acceptance means, for us, that regardless of what's happening, that there's something bigger always at work. So we have faith here. We have a certain acceptance. We know that there's God in action. So for those of us who have some faith, it also means that at the core of your being that you're okay. And if you have that kind of faith and acceptance that there is a spiritual life that you're living an affirmative life, you're connected, you know that not only are you okay, but you will continue to be okay. I usually say I'm fine, I'm supplied and supported, I'm surrounded. I'm an inlet and outlet of God activity. In religious science, we say I am an individualization of this power. So think about, what's an individualization? It's a fancy word. Okay. It means I'm an aspect of it, and you're an aspect of it. You're not something that's separate, you're a part of it. Whatever it is, whatever this source is, this energy, this divine energy that some people call God, other people call other names, you're a part of it. It's inescapable. You are one with it. So we come together, all of you, we have become a hybrid community. And that's going to be the future. We know that is these spiritual centers, the boxes of the churches have closed from coast to coast. There will be hybrid communities where you'll have a studio audience, as we do this evening, and we'll have a larger virtual audience. As COVID goes completely and all of its hybrids, or whatever you want to say, people will come back together in New York and we'll have a decent sized studio audience. But we now know that I've seen it in everything else. I've seen it in 12-step meetings. People tune in. So it's our intention to provide this great virtual service and messaging to everybody that you can watch again on Facebook and YouTube, and also to invite you to be here and inform. So we're glad you're here. As we move more into the idea of acceptance, we know also that there is spirit. There's this one spirit. Some people prefer to call it, there's this presence. So we come together with this knowing that there's this presence, there's this energy. When you know that, there's the peace of spirit, and we contemplate the idea of oneness. As you get involved more in metaphysics, you'll understand that there's one energy, one life. And you'll get away from duality. You'll stop thinking that there's good and evil. You'll understand that there is this one energy and everybody partakes in it. you'll understand that people are doing the best they can. Okay, and that's tough to accept sometimes, because you might say, how can they be doing the best they can when they're doing all these things that they're doing, right? And there's this word consciousness, okay? Louise Hay addressed it. She said, people are doing the best that they can with the information, the understanding, and the awareness that they have. Even when they're in reaction, even when they're acting out, it's not like they're intentionally trying to screw their lives up. It's just they are where they are. And as you get really involved more and more with this teaching and your own self-study, and you realize, okay, I've got to have some compassion for myself. I haven't always been flawless. I haven't always been perfect. There's been times where I've come off, crazy, and I've done things that I regret, and you regret deeply. And the thing is, as you start to develop some compassion for yourself and what you've lived through and what you've accomplished, and you do that inner work, that self-forgiveness and self-appreciation and the inner work that Louise Hay talks about, then it's quite natural for you to mature to the place you think, okay, yeah, these people, and you can think of them, you can have the scorecard, but then you can get back to the place, I'm not them. I didn't live their life. I don't know how they were raised. I don't know everything. And you never know the whole story about another person anyway. And so what you can do is you learn to love yourself. You're better equipped to extend forgiveness, and you just don't want to go towards judging them, because you know that they've done whatever they've done. And then the thing is, you know that you've done things too. And so we're all people. And one of the nice messages about this teaching is consciousness is perfectly unfolding in each and every one of us. And all of us, whatever age we are, if you look back 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, you might say, oh, I don't really like the way I look right now. But if you look back at your life and you've grown. And you've grown through all your experiences, and you've become I remember my mother before she passed away, because we had a chat. We didn't usually have those kind of chats, but one day she said, your father and I had you when we were like in our early 20s. She said, if we could do many things over, I promise you, we would do many things over. But that's somebody who's looking at life who's 70 years old. You've acquired a lot of life experience and a lot of wisdom. And if you look back in your own life, and the best way to look backward, if you have to look backward at all, is to look backward and to see what you have accomplished, to remember the people who have cheered you on, to remember the things that you've done well, and the thing to do here, because usually we stay focused in the here and now, which is what Jimmy was talking about earlier. The past can be useful if your consciousness is low and your self-esteem is not as high as it could be. You can scan your mind and scan your brain. This came out of a recent class, a Science of Mind class I did with Frederick Bales. He said, remember every compliment. Remember even when you're a little girl, when somebody said you're really great. It could be an aunt, it could be a grandfather, it could be anybody. You were doing baking, you were building a truck, you were building a sandcastle, you were doing a project. Remember where somebody gave you those compliments. Remember the things that you were most proud of. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, but all of those memories, in the same way we might make a gratitude list, the memories of the things that we have done well, if you take the time, I think it'd be great to write it down, because you'll probably forget it if you don't. If you write it down, that could be like right there near that gratitude list, because those are the types of things that build your sense of self up. Because you could be out there in a world that's always taking a nick at you, because you're living in the world, you're working in jobs, you're in relationships. Sometimes they're not. It's not that there's bad people. It's just there's a lot of stuff coming at you. And the only person that can build me up in the end is going to be me. I have several really powerful treatments that have been given to me this year. And they build you up, and you might say, well, Greg, you're a minister, you ought to be able to do that on your own. And yes, it's true. But to have these things in front of me, because when you go through these days or these nights, that's your best thing to have. Just keep on reminding you of, how wonderful you are. And that's no lie, it's actually the truth. So in addition to gratitude lists, I'm now suggesting people, take a day, take an afternoon, take an hour, take 20 minutes, write it down, and then go back to it, write it down some more. That's my little chapter in my book. It could be, all the good stuff, and remind yourself of that. So those are some suggestions for self-healing tonight, because I'm completely going off script here with the acceptance talk. Life is perfectly always unfolding. There's an adage in religious science, which is perfect place, perfect time, and all the time. That doesn't mean you're always going to like what's going on, though. Okay? But it means spiritually, there aren't any accidents. Everything's happening in divine order. And I like it the way it was said to me when I was younger by Bill Tolliver. Dr. Bill used to say, it's best to think of this as like a school. You're involved in this schoolhouse with many, many, many lessons to help you grow. Notice he said to help you grow. Emerson would probably say these ideas more eloquently, because he would say, I'm probably misquoting him, but the idea behind it is all the things that are happening are not happening to you. They're happening for your spiritual unfoldment. So if you can grasp that idea, that it's all happening for your growth and betterment, then you're going to be able to segue into the idea of acceptance, which is the topic for tonight a little bit better. If you can understand that all things that are happening, the interactions, the people, the comings and goings, are there for my greater good, you'll get to acceptance quicker. All of life is perfectly unfolding. And part of the process of life is it's unfolding to bring you to a greater place of freedom. Many of us get ourselves all caught up in our lives. Like, we're tied up in a relationship, we're tied up in our jobs, we're more tied up, we don't know how tied up we are. And we have people with all kinds of expectations, and we don't even know what our own thoughts are. So you come into this teaching and we'll ask you crazy questions like, in life, who have you come here to be? And you're asking that of a 60-year-old man or woman. What are your dreams? What were the things you wanted to do? See, there's the kind of questions that get your mind going. And why don't you do some of those things? And we've used examples. Last week or two, there was a woman who was 80 years old in one of the classes who started taking up high diving, if you can imagine. I can't even imagine getting up on that ladder, much less doing a dive. No? I would have taken a dive in a pool like that at a time in my life. Just climbing up in that ladder right now. So, at 80 years old. So, who have you come here to be? So these are some questions you can ask of yourself. And the thing is, it doesn't really matter whether you're 28 or you're 78. You have life in you, and you're here. You really want to start talking about the life that you have and celebrating the life you have. And if you're coming at life that way, you'll get flooded with ideas. There'll be nothing old about you. We're fortunate to live in a time and place where we're free to work and express ourselves and support one another in being who we've come here to be, and being uniquely ourselves. Look at the world right now. I won't go into it all, but people are expressing their unique selves all over the place. And when I was growing up, you couldn't have done any of that stuff. It's like you wouldn't see pink hair, you wouldn't see green hair, you wouldn't see a whole bunch of stuff you wouldn't see. And I'm not suggesting people go out and get all these hair colors, but the point would be, you're living in a time that's much freer for you to be whoever you are. We learn here in class every week. We remind people to start loving yourself. Okay, that's the work of Louise. And we're learning to accept ourselves as we are. And we're learning also, hopefully, to accept other people however they show up. It's really big. Because I grew up in a family, I thought my family was very liberal, and they were for the times, like the 50s. They were liberal. But they weren't nearly as liberal as, I'd think of them, well, they were kind of like not liberal. But, they would sponsor other types of people into their clubs, and they would do things to, reach out to other groups of folks when I was a kid. But they definitely had some very strong biases. And I would know my mother, before she passed away, all those biases she had let go of, And so you look at your life, and if you got any of that stuff going on about anything, really, those judgments you really want to address. So we learn in this class every week. We remind people to love ourselves, and we're always learning to accept ourselves as we are, and accept other people's, as I said, however they are. Please try not to have an opinion about them. The thing about other people is some of them may not have evolved yet. They are where they are. In Louise Hay, in her book, she would say, everyone, again, is doing the best they can with the information and the awareness that they have. So they don't need your condemnation. If anything, they need your love, or at least your compassion. Or if you can't even do that, don't do any harm. Because when people are living lives where there's misery and they're feeling miserable, the last thing they need from any of us is our judgment. There's also a basic Christian principle which has been taught to me since I was this tall, which would be to love everyone and forgive everyone. If you're having a problem with a person, the place always to look at is going to be within yourself. Okay? A real spiritual person they'll try to understand. I judge this person. There's some aspect of me that, I'm seeing in them, and I'd really rather just take it back to myself and release the need to blame. Ernest Holmes used this phrase. He said, we learn to live, if you want to heal, you learn to live what he called the affirmative life. And that's really such a beautiful phrase. And in his sermon to the sea, there is one question that really stood out to me all those years ago when I first, read it. He said, find me one person, just one, who's so redeemed from the bondage of self, and I will find the Redeemer of my soul. I want to hang out with that person. I will want to walk with them and talk with them and be with them. So he's talking about, find me somebody who's redeemed from all the burdens of I'm not enough and all the problems. And find me someone who's living the affirmative life, who's seen the good in their everyday affairs, who speaks of good. That type of person has a healing consciousness. That type of person is a lifter. They're not a critic. Louise Hay would talk about, critical people attract so much terrible things in their life, and she invited us to pay attention to the word should, because if I'm saying you should do this and you should do it, if I'm just barking off commands all day long of what people should do, what would that be saying about me? You wouldn't want to hear me. You wouldn't want to come here listen to these lessons, because if I'm preaching doom and gloom and everything you should do and all that stuff, you don't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. And what that really is, if someone's showing up like that, they obviously have a lot of rigid patterns, and the rigid patterns generally come from the stuff we learned when we were kids, and it's been reinforced for years. And she said, if you notice that you have a lot of rigidity within you, she says, please don't beat yourself up over it. Just begin to start the language. Stop using the word should and all the synonyms, which I stopped using should pretty much, and then I began using other words that meant the same thing. So that would be, you've got to do this, you should, you might, all that stuff where you're telling people what to do. Especially the stuff that's very critical. Because you really want to come from the place of realizing these people, all of them, including me, are doing the best they can. So the way you're going to change, you can't change them, but the way you'll see change in them is by changing you. When you really are loving yourself enough, where you're not giving off all the negativity, the critiques and the criticism, you're going to find your relationships with all these people are going to be very different. And you're going to think, oh my God, they've changed. But it isn't really that they've changed. It's because you've shown up in a different way where they can be who they are without your scorn and your judgment and all the rest. People who live the affirmative life that Ernest Holmes spoke of are committed to practicing the present. Now that's not an easy thing to do because it means always coming back to the now. Always coming back to the now and seeing the good. If I ever write the book that Jimmy spoke of, it will be called The New Moment. And the book will be about finding a way to be in a new moment. That's your life mission. To be in a new moment where you don't have any of the yesterdays, any of the judgments. Because I could know you for just a month or two and I already have a history with you. And if I already have a history with you, that means I have some opinions. And what about if you've known somebody for 5 years or 25 years? Is it possible for you to be in a new moment with a person like that? I mean, you understand the challenge, right? I went to some good therapy over this one question years ago. And the therapist, her name was Shelley, she was wonderful. She'd ask the question, can you be in a new moment? And I said, of course I can. But really what that means is like, I have to drop the story. You know, that's one of the great things of this teaching, and Ram Dass and all the other people who've talked on this subject, which is be here now. You know, be here now would mean, I got to drop all that story. So there's a person in your life, there's always somebody or a couple of people or a few people. Do you have the willingness to do that? And attempt to be in a new moment with them? That's some work. We have phrases here like, you are the cause to your own experience. You've heard that before. You're the author of your own experience. Another thing that I've thought about for a long time, if I'm the person who's writing the book, I'm also creating the roles. So when people come into your life, you can create them to be the king or the queen, the court jester. You can create them to be a menace, a pest, your nemesis, your adversary. Now, in truth and in fact, they are none of these things. You're the author of your own life. So we'll come back to the idea of being in a new moment. And you wake up each morning and you pause and you meditate and you think, okay, just for today, you know, I'm clearing my mind of all this stuff and I'm going to live today with positive expectancy and I'm going to see every encounter as a holy encounter and I'm going to release the need to judge whoever this is. And that's the spiritual work you do. You know, keep on practicing seeing the good. Edwina Gaines was a great gift to me. She was a teacher, prosperity teacher, New Thought teacher, and she used the words good and God synonymously. That was really great for me to hear her probably 25 years ago. To hear somebody using good and God exchangeably. She'll say, you're here to see the good and the God and the good. You know, if you're practicing this teaching, you're here to see the good. So if you keep on looking to see the good, you're healing your life because you're not going to keep going towards what's missing, what's wrong, and what's wrong with them, and what's wrong with me. If I keep on coming at what's wrong with everybody, how am I going to heal my life if I keep on seeing what's wrong with everybody? So we always come back to the starting point where we center ourselves and we know that there is spirit, and that spirit's in us operating through us. And we have this great executive power where we can speak our word and things start to happen. As we continually make affirmations, affirmative prayers, they start to build up in our our subconscious. Because in your subconscious is a whole bunch of stuff that's been there a long, long, long time. And if you want to heal your life, you really want to take charge of that conversation. And you can take charge of that conversation, but it requires a certain amount of willingness to stay with it. So there's some of us, like people like me, I've been taking these classes forever, and not because I have to, because I like to, and they make you strong, and they really help. I've had students who tune into some version of this every week. Sometimes they might watch it on a rebroadcast on Facebook or YouTube. But this kind of positive messaging is not for us, it's not for the church, whether you ever donate a penny or you don't. This kind of positive messaging just builds you up. It reminds you of how great you are, the power you have to use, and and it'll bring you around. It would always be suggesting forgive, release, cancel, cancel. When you're doing your affirmative prayers and you're going to state powerful affirmations, in that process, oftentimes things come up in mind that will say, oh, no, you're not a success. Oh, you're a failure. And that's where you really need to do the work. And you say, look, I release the need to think of myself as anything less than wonderful. I cancel the idea, I replace it, and then you remember the successes that I talked about earlier. And you just bring that right into your memory. If you commit to this process and you stay with it, you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. But it does take a little bit of time. When I was teaching the law of attraction from the movie The Secret years ago, I probably had people coming for 26 weeks to a single class, and it was wonderful for us, for us growing the church or the center. But in the end, the secret only takes you so far. Because you've got the big blue genie in the sky that's always saying, your wish is my command, for those of you who saw it. And that's the universe saying yes. The universe really says yes to what you really believe. So if people were dreaming of homes and necklaces and bicycles and all the things they were affirming in the movie, it's not that those things can't come to you, because they can. But everything comes to us through consciousness. So you have to have the consciousness to embody a nice relationship. And the same way you have to have the consciousness to demonstrate nice surroundings. Your spiritual atmosphere has to be harmonious if you want to have harmony, right? It's not logical to think you're going to magically, like bewitch, twitch your nose and have it all turn if you don't build that up within yourself. So Louise would always say it's like cleaning a house. You begin whatever room you're in, you start there, and you stay at it. Let me get a little more on track. So those of us who are committed to seeing the God and good in life, to live the affirmative life, are called truth students. At least that's the term that was a minister told me 30 years ago. Greg, you were a truth student. And I thought, oh, I'm a truth student. I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. And what it meant was that we're focused on the truth of God. We're focused on the truth of life. We're focused on the perfection that's in everything and everyone. We're focused on that, realizing we're part of that one energy. Deepak Chopra describes it as this continuous field of energy, this continuum. The whole universe is alive, and so are you. We live in it, we move in it, we have our being in it. And in this class in particular, we focus on loving and accepting ourselves as we are right now. And again, some of you might be saying, oh, listen to him, but you think of yourself as your life is not working. The fact of the matter is your life is working perfectly. It's reflecting your thoughts and your thinking. And okay, you might say, but I don't like it. And it's okay. Well, then starting now, let's start doing something about it. And, I would suggest keeping a journal and keeping a gratitude list. I'm going to make it really simple. Because if you're in here a long time, I could give you books to read and things to meditate on and all that, but it isn't necessary. You can start working with a gratitude list. I had a group in Miami of people that were ex-prisoners. They were stuck with me for 6 months. And they were a tough crowd. And they didn't want to speak. So I got eventually around to thinking, I got to try something. I started with gratitude. And because I had to sit with them for 12 hours a week. And basically I got these guys who've been in prison for years to start talking about being grateful for something. As soon as that started to happen, a little crack in that group over the course of a few months, they had a longer list. And then they started to trust me more. And then finally I gave them the assignment. I can't remember exactly what I said, but will you make me a promise? And then they said, yeah, because they built up the trust. Would you read that list to yourself every single day? And that group wound up being such a success. The director of the whole operation, it was huge, wanted to know what I was doing with her program, because that group of people that I was involved with were transforming the whole program. And it was all coming from inside out. It's coming from their inner dialogue, their inner conversation. And so a gratitude list can do wondrous things, especially if you read it to yourself and remind yourself of it. It's wonderful to do at the start of your day. Some people meditate, and meditation is wonderful because in meditation, sometimes Spirit speaks to you, you get ideas, but Spirit's going to speak to you anyway. Throughout your day, you're going to get moments of inspiration because you can't stop that. So you don't need to worry about Spirit speaking to you. Spirit always gives you the nudges. Gratitude lists can really shape a direction in which your experience will go. The same way if you have another kind of list of remembering your successes, because we get to a point oftentimes when we feel like we're being hammered in our day-to-day living, in our relationships, and our jobs and all. Somebody's got to be your best friend, and that somebody really has to be you. Right. So those are three little suggestions. Let me see for time, because I could go on and turn this into a whole afternoon workshop here if I'm not careful. Okay, I'm getting to the point where I should break. So we practice acceptance and self-love right here, right now. It's never too late to start your day over. That's an adage I learned from a 12-step program. It's true. Raymond Charles Barker said, yesterday ended last night. Okay? In other words, don't bring that junk into today. Get a good night's sleep if you can, and wake up and have yourself a few. You don't have to have a long gratitude list. Have some things just to remind you of something. You know, when you get more sophisticated, you know, Louise just needed to look at yellow roses. And she looked at yellow roses, her whole world turned fine, right? Maybe we're not all there yet. Maybe reading 8 or 9 things about ourselves, you know, in the form of gratitude lists, you know, have something in front of you. For many years, I used affirmations. When I was living, I had a house, small house. I had those sticky notes on all the mirrors. I had magnets on the refrigerator. People would think I'm a new age crazy person. But I was reading all those things. They didn't do me any harm, I promise you. Because what you're training yourself is to see the good and start to see the good in everything. Then you can become more sophisticated. Then you can start to see there's God there in Jimmy, there's God in each of you, there's God in every, you know, this presence, this power is in everything and everyone and all the time. So you begin working with it. That's a person who's learning about self-healing. That's a person who's practicing the teaching. You're coming in here not trying to get anything. You know, this church can only give you reminders of how wonderful you are, the potential you have, and so you can go out and work with it, right, for yourself. We teach you an idea from the Sanskrit. Here, the word is namaste. When you see people in the street, you don't have to talk to them, but in your mind you could say namaste, okay? And that means I see the divinity. I see the spiritual being that you are. If you walk through the streets of New York or wherever you're living, you start to see the God in everybody. What do you think that's going to do for you? That's going to elevate you. I remember, there's one last story. Some of you heard it before. I remember as younger, I was living in Miami. There was a Krishna temple down the street. We all went to go there for their good food. And I was It was a hotel and a temple, and they had good food. And they were chanting all the time, right? And I didn't know. I was young and not very smart. I don't mean to be critical, but I didn't know what the hell they were doing. And they were chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna. There were like 6, 7 different words. And I said to somebody, what does that mean? And they said, well, they're all synonyms for God. And I said, well, they seem very happy. And the answer was, well, Greg, if you were thinking about God all day long, what do you think you would be? You'd be experiencing a state of bliss. So we don't necessarily chant all day long or do anything like that, but we're wanting to practice the teaching, which is seeing the good in everything and in everyone. And most of all, start to see, God didn't make any mistake in you. Each of you are perfect in the world, and you're wonderful beyond anything you could ever understand. So we want you to reclaim that and understand who you are and love yourself more. And then you naturally will begin to extend it to others. So that's it for today. Thank you very much.